So I've been thinking, what exactly is a fractal? Where is the real Dessa? And who's this guy? Welcome to MindSpike. The mysteries that surround the Fractals of the Mist, and especially that of the supposed creator Dessa, is something I know a lot of people, myself included, have been contemplating for the longest time now. Recently though, something happened, and no, it's not the sudden addition of a mini island that I observed to appear inside the Mist-like Observatory earlier this week, though I will get back to that mini island in a little bit. No, the something that I'm specifically referring to is the newly proposed idea from ArenaNet in their blog post about the changes coming to Fractals of the Mist, which clearly labels any and all fractal instances as islands. And so this got me thinking, why islands? For this, let's start someplace simple. Earlier this week, I took a deeper dive into the story of Ellen Keel with my Tyrian characterology. In it, Keel encounters the supposed creator of the Mist-like Observatory, the Asura Dessa, and her crew. Now, I haven't talked about Dessa yet in a characterology episode, but in short, she and her crew are linked to a whole array of temporal mysteries. So far, what we know about them is that they created the place we know as the Mist-like Observatory, a place that inhabits the machine capable of transporting adventurers into different fractals, or should I say, fractal islands, which take place in different time zones or perhaps even unknown worlds or universes. This is seemingly done by using huge amounts of energy generated underneath the machine, which lets any adventurer pass through the mists in a sparkly flow of energy. Let's put a pin in the aspect of mist transportation for now and return to it in a bit. Instead, let's take a second to define what a fractal actually is before we dig a little deeper. In the real world, the concept of a fractal is just a never-ending pattern, infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. Basically, they are just repetitions of the same simple process over and over again in an infinite loop. Fractals are, in essence, images of dynamic systems, perfect pictures of chaos. Alright, so this definition would imply the notion that each fractal island in and of itself is an infinitely recurring pattern of a previous historic event. This is what mathematical physicists call a closed time-like curve, or a CTC. In general, a CTC is a theoretical occurrence which implies that a material particle in space-time will return to its starting point, which in principle implies that time travel can be done backwards. Now bear with me here, I know Guild Wars is a game, and it doesn't necessarily need to resemble reality at every point, but so far we've only heard that it's possible for Dessa's machine to let adventurers traverse worlds and universes as well as time, and so the actual physics might as well be non-essential. But can we honestly claim that any of our current fractal islands have any actual evidence of them taking place in the future, or even in another dimension? Not really, I'd say. The closest we get to something that remotely resembles something otherworldly is this guy, the Colossus. Though some may argue that the Jade Maw and the Solid Ocean Fractal indeed also resemble something otherworldly, though that may simply be due to the very starry skybox that surrounds it, which makes it look a lot more spacey. Thing is, if you look closely, even Dessa explicitly state that her machine is simply tapping into the legacy code of Tyria. Yeah, Tyria, with the word legacy implying past event. So there's that. Now, a CTC is a concept that closely resembles what many sci-fi movies call a time loop, though the two concepts differ wildly at their core. But given the fact that reality isn't necessarily portrayed perfectly in the game, fractals may as well have been created by ArenaNet to resemble a time loop instead. Fun fact though, a time loop is really just a plot device in storytelling and not an actual theoretical concept. Now, my argument for it being a CTC is that the CTC in theory allows for the isolation of given particles. In this case, every particle essential to the event that unfolds in front of us as we partake in the adventure. And so the idea here is that Dessa's machine not only isolates the time of the given event, but it isolates the very specific particles that surround it, the creatures, the structures, the light, and most importantly, the earth that holds everything up, which creates something that, seen from an outside perspective, resembles a tiny island floating in the mists. This also means that we don't actually travel in time per se. We travel to an isolated copy of an event. We seem to not be able to change any part of this fractured reality or the outcome of it. We can only interact with it because in the end, every particle will revert back to its starting point, yet the events still basically take place in this copy. Just listen for a second to Dessa talk about her experience of the Thaumanova reactor.
Being trapped in the moments leading to their own deaths, repeating it with every new fractal insertion, horrific. Watching them die was bad enough. I can only imagine how it must feel. I sincerely hope I never find out.
Right there, in this one line, she explains exactly what she's created. An isolated reality in which events actually unfold, or as Dessa specifically calls it, explorable chunks of reality. But what does this knowledge have to do with Dessa herself? Well, we know that Dessa's crew built the Mistlock Observatory sometime before the birth of the Sylvari, which is a little over 20 years ago now, and yet they seem to possess no memories or knowledge of anything that has happened since the time of them building the machine. Not the Sylvari being born, not the Thaumanova reactor exploding, and not even meeting Ellen Keel. Yeah, that's right. As Keel enters the Mistlock Observatory and sees its potential power in action, she decides to arrest Dessa and bring her back to Lion's Arch, but as soon as Dessa enters the gate, we see a bright white light, and suddenly Dessa is standing right beside Keel again, as she always does.
I don't know what kind of mecha magical gizmo you're using, but you can't get away from us that easily.
I'm sorry, have we met? Welcome to the Mistlock Observatory. So, are you interested in exploring the fractals?
You really don't recognize me, do you?
Strange, right? Well, if we assume that every fractal island, in essence, is an infinite repetition of an isolated copy of an event in past time, we could, in fact, go as far as to say that the Mistlock Observatory indeed is its own fractal island, meaning this little island, alongside Dessa and her crew, is nothing but a copy of the real deal. But if that's true, we are left with a few gaping holes. First off, where is the real Mistlock Observatory, and where in the world is Dessa? Secondly, if Dessa is the lead expert on the matter, who then opened the gate from Lion's Arch to this copy of the observatory? As for the first one, my guess is as good as yours, really. She could be anywhere. But for the second one, I've got two dominant theories going. One being that Dessa herself possibly created this fractal and the copy of herself, perhaps under the pressure from the consortium, since we know that they back her research. This could also explain the conveniently located Asura gate to Lion's Arch, that the version of Dessa in the observatory really doesn't seem to know leads to Lion's Arch, referring to the city as that pirate haven. The other theory being that once Dessa and her crew tapped into this power, they essentially became stuck in this closed time-like curve, separating themselves from reality as we know it, causing their future existence to be erased. If we assume this last one to be true, the only possible explanation for us to still have a link to the observatory has to be because the observatory already had an Asura gate installed, which was possibly linked to some place other than Lion's Arch. And so with the already established link, the only thing the consortium had to do was to relocate the entry portal to a place more convenient for consumerism. Only the consortium would be dim-witted enough to monopolize a discovery like this in the form of a deadly amusement park. Now, if we again assume that all of these fractal islands in fact exist in a CTC, exactly where do they exist? What allows them to be cut off from reality? Well, my guess is that Dessa successfully, if not even accidentally, created an access point to what we would know in the Guild Wars universe as the Rift. The Rift is essentially the exact middle of the mists, the binding point between all dimensions, past, present, future, and the exact point where those who have the know-how to travel across the universe through the mists must pass through on their way to all places. It is the center of all things. Here, time moves neither forward nor back. It is the point of perfect balance. Which could also explain how we come to see simple, tiny fragments of time appear out of nowhere, just like the newly added clump of Earth and Ascalonian structure that was recently added beside the Mist-like Observatory. Essentially, these islands exist in their own reality. They cannot see past their own boundaries because the copies do not have the know-how to see beyond the mist. Now, the problem for Dessa though is that she, instead of creating a gate through the rift, managed to get herself stuck right on this intersection of space-time, freezing herself in time. And so, just like the observatory, every fractal island manifested within the rift itself is stuck in this closed time-like curve. Nonetheless, Dessa's mission of gathering information from each fractal island goes unhindered, but a curious thing is that Dessa barely seemed to have any real control of which fractal island she sends heroes off to. Sure, mechanically this randomness is being removed with the changes in Heart of Thorns, but for the sake of argument, let's assume the current randomness isn't intended by ArenaNet to be portrayed as a mere mechanical aspect, but rather a lore aspect. Basically, it seems like Dessa is just supplying huge amounts of power to the machine in the hopes of it sending adventurers off to any already manifested destination within the rift. As stated earlier, each of these destinations mark a point in the Tyrian legacy code, and according to Dessa, we the adventurers are sent in to stabilize the fractals. She implies this in at least one line of dialogue in almost every original fractal, except one. Throughout all 15 fractal islands, there exists only one which break the norm, one anomaly, if I may, and that one is the Cliffside Fractal. The specific fractal which houses a gargantuan Colossus unlike anything we've ever seen in the Guild Wars universe, and especially not on Tyria. Now, I realize that the prevalent theory about this Colossus is that it, as well as the Cliffside Fractal, stem back to ancient times, near what we believe to be the beginning of history. I would argue, though, that this is not true. Instead, I believe that the Archdiviner and his chanters created the prison we see before us, and just like the observatory, extended it into the rift itself. On purpose, though, unlike Dessa, here they would then capture and hold the Colossus as it traveled through the mists. Meaning the Cliffside Fractal wouldn't really exist at any specific time, rather it would exist at every possible time inside the rift, locking the Colossus in place so as to never traverse the mists again and return to the world. If indeed we agree to follow the logic that every fractal island in essence is a chunk of reality suspended in space-time inside what we know as the rift, the question is then, do we the players have an actual historical influence on the events that unfold in every reality? My main answer would be no, we don't, really. Though my belief is that in the case of the Cliffside Fractal, we indeed do alter the situation. Why, you ask? Because if you decide to stay inside the fractal for a little while after the game prompts you to continue, this happens. This is basically a much bigger and cleaner version of the animation we see appear when a player character travels through the mists via Dessa's machine. So by breaking the seals that bind the Colossus to the island, his powers are freed from the prison, he thanks you, and then continues his quest through the mists, finally passing through the rift to some other place in time and space. Now, if we want to go full tinfoil hat mode here, because it's not like this theory is already way out. If we assume that the rift is the intersection between all times, the chanters that bound the Colossus could have initially been born at any point in time and then travel to the rift. Because as soon as they are in the rift, they would be able to come in contact with anything passing through this intersection from the past, present, or future. Meaning the Colossus himself could be thousands, if not millions of years older than them. Heck, the Colossus himself could stem back from the beginning of time, as many have noted. He might even be the creator of time and worlds for all we know. And so if indeed it's true that the Colossus hold just a piece of the power to create worlds, the mists, or time for that matter, freeing him from his prison to allow him to proceed on his journey to create such wonders may indeed be the single most epic accomplishment we the players will ever experience, and that is without knowing we ever did anything other than partake in the adventures of an amusement park. Now, I realize that some aspects of this theory may come off as something resembling that of a crackpot one. I'm a huge fan of crackpot theories, by the way, but nonetheless, I personally believe I may have struck ore here, or at least I hope I raised your curiosity to the point where this theory might linger in your mind the next time your adventures take you to the mists. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter in the comments down below. But for now, thank you all for watching. Until next time, I will see you in the mists.
My life's work is here, and I couldn't leave it even if I wanted to.